One night, a 10-year-old boy named Lin Chi climbed to the top of the roof to see the moon in its perfect state. But at that moment, he could see a six-winged entity in the direction of the moon, which gave him a terrifying stare. A stare that burned the boy's eyes and left him with damaged vision. In his case, Lin Chi was found to have a severe mental disorder, causing him to have frequent delusions, all because he had an accident when he fell from the roof of his house. To calm the rebellious boy down, the doctors gave him tranquilizers. This was done in very high doses, and it took several years before he was finally discharged. It is said that the Earth was in an unreasonable state at the time, starting about 100 years ago with the appearance of a strange fog in Antarctica. The mysterious fog spread very quickly throughout the world. All the countries that were enveloped by the mysterious fog eventually fell, and no news was heard from them until now. In the end, the spread of the mist stopped at the border area of Daxia, a place that is considered to be the last civilization on the entire Earth that still survives. It was indeed a very strange phenomenon. But as time passed, the people of Daxia slowly began to forget about it, forgetting what the mist was really about. Then, why did the people who were wrapped in it never return, while only the country of Daxia could still survive? Of course, they all knew, but preferred to close their eyes and live their days normally. In the morning in Chang'an City at a red light, a man wearing a blindfold was carrying vegetables and carrying a gallon of oil with a stick. The cane is supposed to be used to read the road because he is blind, which, of course, is Lin Chi, the main character of the series. Because Lin Chi was using his cane to carry goods, a little girl next to him offered to help him cross the road. But instead of the child providing assistance, it was Lin Chi who guided the child, crossing the road as the leader of the road so confidently when the light was green, instantly making him the center of attention of other travelers. Having vision problems but remaining confident makes Lin Chi even more conspicuous, and locals who already know him well occasionally talk about him not being able to see because when he was a child, he had an accident. He hit his head when climbing the roof of the house, and he also used to say that he saw an angel on the moon, so he had to be taken to a mental hospital. Although he can't see, he can now walk normally, avoid obstacles on the road without using a cane, and even dodge a basketball that almost hit him, making some people think that Lin Chi is actually just pretending to be blind. He himself lived in a multi-story but rather shabby-looking house, along with a younger brother named Yang Jin and an aunt who had taken care of him since childhood. He didn't know who his real parents were. After shopping, Lin Chi was slightly reprimanded by his aunt for buying expensive cooking oil when there was still plenty of cheap oil he could buy, and the change could be saved to pay for Lin Chi's college tuition in the future. Yang Jin comes over and gives his brother a pair of sunglasses, which should be cooler than the eye patch Lin Chi is wearing now. Even though Lin Chi has been discharged from the psychiatric hospital, the doctors still continue to check on him regularly. Like now in his room, Lin Chi told Dr. Lee that he could see but could not see when he saw bright lights. Lin Chi no longer hallucinates, has no amnesia, no more headaches, and has a good quality of sleep. Actually, rather than being considered mentally ill because he can see angels on the moon, Lin Chi here prefers to lie in order to live a normal life. Dr. Lee suddenly asked a perverse question, asking if Lin Chi believed in the existence of gods in this world. But Lin Chi's response was to shake his head. What's more, he felt that the angelic figure he had seen in the past was only due to the effect of hitting his head. The doctor continued to ask if Lin Chi believed that there were figures known as mythological monsters in this world. After the appearance of the mysterious fog, there were indeed some reports stating about the appearance of mythological monsters, but it seems to be just a rumor, according to Lin Qi, because until now there has been no relevant evidence that shows the existence of such creatures. At the same time, elsewhere, an underground tunnel worker was seen getting attacked by a mysterious creature. But before the worker would be threatened, there was a flying spear that landed on the creature first, making it die first. And it was flown by a girl who then entered the interior of the underground tunnel, and she began to carry out a massacre of the mythological monster creatures that attacked. These creatures are known as ghost masks. The lady didn't just act alone. There were also several other people who were assigned to different parts of the tunnel. Take, for example, these two sword-wielding men who also seem to have a special ability. In addition to the spear girl and the two sword guys earlier, there's also the bespectacled girl and the sniper guy, who get their respective parts, suggesting that these are all from the same group. Let's call them the Night Watchers. Behind the scenes, there is a person who might be the leader of the group and who controls the division of tasks so that the operation runs properly. In the group, there is also one more person. He is an uncle who will have an important role in the future, and now he is seen chasing several ghost masks who are trying to escape. The uncle was named Lao Jiao, and he was asked to complete his task before the ghost masks entered the sewer and headed towards the human living area. On the other hand, the two men with the swords had finished cleaning up, one of them using his hypno ability to make the workers, who looked terrified, forget everything that had happened there, while the other one told Mr. Zhao to immediately put up a barrier to prevent the monsters from escaping. Mr. Zhao didn't want to do it because it was too difficult to do in his current state. In the midst of his pursuit, Mr. Zhao was quite overwhelmed because he had to chase while climbing stairs, while the monsters jumped easily from the side of the building. Not long after, a spear-wielding lady appeared and easily finished off the three monsters that Mr. Zhao was chasing. The lady didn't leave a single piece for Mr. Zhao. So does this show that Mr. Zhao was the weakest among the group? At dinner time, Lin Qi told his aunt and brother. From the previous checkup, the doctor said that Lin Qi could see and his head was no longer dizzy, so he could go back to school. Because Lin Qi had a disability, his aunt and brother were quite worried, because usually people like Lin Qi were quite often bullied at school. But Lin Qi here asks them not to worry. It's better if they just continue celebrating Lin Qi's new life from now on. Back in his room, while removing the blindfold, Lin Qi indirectly apologized to his aunt and brother for lying. In fact, Lin Qi's eyesight still hasn't improved, even though he's been trying to get used to using his eyes to see for the past few years, but it seems to be useless. Lin Qi actually has a lot of big questions for the world, such as why the angelic figure he saw burned his eyes until he was like now, and if his eyesight was exchanged by the perception ability he also got 5 years ago. Even if he closes his eyes, he can see everything so clearly. He also had another question about Dr. Li. Why did he ask questions that were kept from the previous medical records? It seemed like he was not an ordinary doctor, and the strangest thing of all was the dream. For the past 5 years, when Lin Qi fell asleep, he would have dreams where he was placed in the same location, a plain with endless fog, and there was a large building that was also very mysterious. When he entered the dream, all Lin Qi had to do was knock on the door of the huge building called the Asylum of the God, which again raised the question of whether there really was a God living inside the huge building, and whether the angel he saw was also inside. Although until now the door he knocked on has not opened, Lin Qi is very sure that all the questions and answers he wants are contained in the Asylum of God. So how else was he going to open the great gates before him? The next day, Lin Qi, a transfer student, entered the school. Some male students wondered how a blind person like Lin Chi could go to school in such a normal place. Not according to expectations, because after entering the classroom, instead of being bullied, Lin Chi received a good welcome from some of his classmates. And it turns out that all of this is because of the aunt, who had previously bribed the students with eggs, and hoped that they would help Lin Chi, who has a deficiency in vision. From here on, Lin Chi promised to study hard to solve his problems, get a decent job, and finally be able to repay the aunt who had taken care of him all this time and live a better life. Lin Chi's friends who were bribed by his aunt were quite helpful and responsible, as they also took the time to take Lin Chi home, even though Lin Chi didn't really need to. Lin Chi is also still not used to it, even though people have been treating him as an old man for a long time. Of the 5 students, one of them said goodbye because he just happened to be passing by on the same street. And after the student said goodbye, strangeness began to appear. A pungent stench began to smell, and it came from the alley entered by the student who had just said goodbye. The situation was even more tense when a terrible sound came from the direction of the alley, coinciding with the appearance of a terrible figure which made you miss it because it had just preyed on the student who had just left. Elsewhere, Mr. Zhao, who was playing a game, suddenly received a call from his boss, who said that there were several ghost masks appearing around the old city area. The ghost masks would pose a threat to civilians, which is why Mr. Zhao was asked to go to the scene as soon as possible and set up a barrier around the area. Back to Lin Chi. When faced with a horror that could get them killed, only then did Lin Chi's classmates show their true colors. One of them ran away and said, "Just leave the blind man there," while pushing Lin Chi down. After getting back on his feet, Lin Chi also asked the frightened female student to run away immediately, but unfortunately, when he turned around, the girl's bag accidentally pushed Lin Chi towards the monster. Not far away, Mr. Zhao, who had arrived, erected some poles to activate the reddish barrier. It was a special barrier that only monsters could pass through, while humans could go in and out unconditionally. After the large-scale barrier was activated, the operation began, and Mr. Zhao was asked to join the hunting team as soon as the barrier was completed. Meanwhile, Lin Chi, who tried to run away, ended up in a dead end, and he couldn't escape from the pack of monsters that came to make an ambush. He could only survive with the stick he was carrying. As a child, after his eyesight was damaged and he fell off a roof, Lin Chi was considered a hallucinating lunatic. Now that he's free and able to go to school, he's faced with danger. So in order to continue living his new life, Lin Chi doesn't want to die here, so he has to fight monsters to survive. While trying to fight back, Lin Chi's blindfold fell off, leaving him with a split consciousness. He was defending against the ghost mask's attacks, and he was also knocking on the asylum of the god's threshold. The situation was further aggravated when several ghost masks began to appear and attack, smashing Lin Chi's body on the ground. Finally, in his crisis, the gates of the asylum of the god opened, while Lin Chi suddenly released a golden light from his eyes into the clouds, knocking away the ghost masks that were attacking his body. The packaging light could be witnessed with the naked eye by the residents. Mr. Zhao, who was on his way to his team's location, stopped on the way to see the origin of the light. Some people from the Night Watcher battle team asked if the phenomenon they were seeing was the birth of a new forbidden ruin. This forbidden ruins means the magical equipment that they use, guys. But it doesn't seem to be, because the power being radiated feels more like the divine power of the gods. And of course, the Night Watcher leader was convinced that it wasn't a forbidden ruin, but divine power. Fierce, holy, and powerful. This was a power that referred to the figure codenamed God 003, King of Seraph, or Archangel Michael. A glimmer of his power now resided in the body of a disciple who was once considered a madman, Lin Qi, whose eyes had regained their sight. Inside the Asylum of the Gods, there are several rooms with doors that have symbols of the gods. Then the scene moved to Lin Qi, who received the blessing of the divine eye. And now in his eyes, the movements of the monsters that were previously fast became very slow, and there was a massacre using his staff. When Ghost Mask was down to 1 and moving towards Lin Qi, Mr. Zhao suddenly appeared. He showed his skills, slashing the monster's body with his sword moves and easily decapitating it. The uncle here felt cool when it was just an assist kill. While sucking on a Marlboro cigarette, Mr. Zhao asks if he looked cool just now, and if Lin Qi wanted to, he could also be cool like Mr. Zhao if he followed him. Lin Qi immediately ignored Mr. Zhao and turned around to leave Mr. Zhao, who was intending to recruit. Next, we will be taken to a place called the Church of the Ancient God. An old church is occupied by a group of mysterious organizations that are very fanatical about the existence of mythological gods. In the gathering, one of them said that there was a new god agent who had been born. He is an agent of the King of Seraph, or Michael. Because his strength will be very useful in this organization, a goal is made to bring the divine agent, aka Lin Qi, to the place alive. Meanwhile, elsewhere, a Coca-Cola drink driver, with no A at the end, is seen delivering goods somewhere. But in fact, what he is carrying is not some kind of soft drink, but dozens of horrible human predator creatures. The Ghost Mask. Yang Jin, who saw his brother coming home too late, asked if he was okay, especially since he didn't come home with his cane. After answering that he was fine, Lin Qi immediately went inside and closed the door tightly with the excuse that he was very tired on his first day of school. Yang Jin clearly sensed that Lin Qi was covering up something, because at that moment, Yang Jin could smell the blood coming from his brother's body. So tired was he that he slept while sitting right behind the door, and again he entered into a similar dream, the Asylum of God. But it was different from before, as the main large gate of the building could be opened, allowing Lin Qi to enter. Surprisingly enough, after entering the courtyard area of the magnificent building, Lin Qi immediately found that the place was really very similar to the mental hospital where he was treated. All the facilities were also similar, which made Lin Qi even more interested in exploring inside. After wandering around for a while, there was a hallway containing several rooms, and only the hallway area looked different from the mental hospital where he used to be. Lin Qi then tried to open some of the rooms there, but it seemed like almost all of the room doors were locked. However, there is a room with a door that has a crescent moon symbol, which is one of the only rooms that can be opened by him. Right when he walked in, there was a beautiful woman dressed like a fairy. She was sitting quietly on a bench, but when the woman looked at Lin Qi, he could immediately tell that she was a goddess.
你好。
When Lin Chi steps one foot into the room, packaging lines that form a pattern appear, centered towards the ceiling, which also brings up a mission that requires Lin Chi to help Goddess Nyx treat her mental illness. And when the progress number has reached the specified value of 1%, 50%, or 100%, he will get various skills from Goddess Nyx that are randomly determined. In Greek mythology, Lin Chi is quite familiar with the meaning of Nyx, aka Nyx, also known as the Goddess of Night, the Mother of the Gods. Since the goddess seemed to be silent, Lin Chi came over to greet her, and suddenly she reacted, looking at Lin Chi with a sad expression and saying that she had finally found her child, and came over to give her a hug. Lin Chi, who had never met his parents before, had a strange thought. Could this goddess Nyx really be his mother? But it turned out that everything was just a misunderstanding. Instead of hugging Lin Chi, the goddess hugged the decorative urn behind Lin Chi and regarded the object as her son. It's true what the mission board says. The goddess of the night has a mental illness, guys. Elsewhere, the Night Watchers were gathered to discuss Mr. Zhao letting go of the divine agent. Lin Chi had actually left to get his school bag, but he didn't come back. Because a student would not skip school, in the end, the next day, Mr. Zhao also went to school to be able to meet with Lin Chi. A hilarious incident occurred when Mr. Zhao calmed down a crying little boy who made his target pass by without him noticing. As usual, Lin Chi is intertwining his days, but now he's also trying to learn books about psychiatrists and psychologists in hopes of helping improve the progress of helping Goddess Nyx. He even consulted with a doctor regarding the condition of the Goddess Nyx, whom Lin Chi referred to as a friend affected by mental illness. Meanwhile, Mr. Zhao is still unable to find Lin Chi, especially with only an ugly caricature drawing that the students know. After studying mental illnesses from books and being enlightened by doctors, Lin Chi found that the goddess Nyx was extremely mentally traumatized, began to reject reality, and only wanted to live in her imagination. What Lin Chi needed to do next was find the origin of her trauma and provide dual treatment through medication and counseling guidance. The scene back at the asylum of the god, Lin Chi, with the appearance of a doctor giving sedatives to Goddess Nyx. Meanwhile, Goddess Nyx, who looks calm, holds an urn that is considered her son while saying, if the older brother of her son will definitely return soon, and the god she means is Danadus, who has left and still hasn't returned after 3,000 years. It was from here that Lin Chi discovered that Danadus was one of the causes of Goddess Nyx having a mental disorder. Lin Chi then hugged the sad Nyx, calling her mother, and said that she had returned. Of course, here Lin Chi will play the role of Danadus. After all, Lin Chi has never received affection from a mother figure. Along with the golden teardrops that fell on Lin Chi's shoulders, a notification also appeared to inform him that the progress of the medical mission had risen to 3%, making him fulfill the requirement to be able to obtain one of Goddess Nyx's abilities, randomly determined by the roulette. After spinning the needle of the roulette, it stopped at the Starry Night Dancer's skill. The name sounded a bit strange, but the ability had a marvelous effect. When night falls, Lin Chi will experience a 5-fold increase in speed, strength, endurance, and toughness than usual. And now Lin Chi is putting those abilities to the test by parkouring in the middle of the city. In addition to gaining improvements in some aspects, when it was nighttime, Lin Chi also gained the ability to communicate with nocturnal animals such as bats and night butterflies. That was very helpful when Lin Chi needed information. Well, even though it could only be used at night, it was already amazing, and Lin Chi continued to parkour in the city with a happy face. Inside the asylum of the gods, there were 6 different gods in their respective rooms. If Lin Chi can heal all of them, then of course he can also get the skills possessed by the gods, even if only partially. And the question now is, when can he open the second door? Especially the door that has a golden crown symbol that refers to one of the gods from China. Who exactly is the figure of God? Okay. Not long after, a bat appeared to inform Lin Chi of a very important piece of information that he could not afford to miss. Elsewhere, the Coca-Cola driver defecated briefly behind the reeds. At the same time, in the area of heavy goods warehouses, Lin Chi also appeared, with a bat guiding his way. The animal led Lin Chi to a Coca-Cola rocking car, indicating that there was something unusual stored inside. When he heard the sound from inside the car, Lin Chi was sure that the sound came from a large number of ghost masks. Not long after, the driver returned and paused when he saw Lin Chi picking up a piece of metal from the container. This driver referred to Lin Chi as the Night Watcher. Lin Chi, who heard it, wondered what the Night Watcher actually meant. This coincided with the back door of the car being broken into by the ghost mask. Dozens of monsters immediately spread out in various directions. When Lin Chi was ambushed by a group of ghost masks, the driver behind him also attacked. But Lin Chi easily used the monster to withstand the attack of the driver, who used a purplish magic stick as his weapon. The battle continued, with Lin Chi being targeted by the ghost mask. It seems that the creature no longer poses a threat to Lin Chi, who has gained superpowers. Lin Chi can defeat Ghost Mask even though he is being ganged up with only an iron rod. And of course, in the end, Lin Chi managed to finish off the monstrous creatures, as well as render the driver unconscious. Lin Chi actually wanted to hear more about the so-called Night Watcher. But he would find out later. For now, he would leave the scene first, so as not to get into bigger trouble. When he continued his parkour, he was unlucky because here, Lin Chi stepped on a part of the building that was broken, and he unexpectedly fell right into the hands of Mr. Zhao, who had been looking for Lin Chi all day. To continue the chat between the two of them, Lin Chi was taken to a nightlife location. The two would chat in one of the rooms without hiring a lady of the night. Once inside the room, and not forgetting to light a Marlboro cigarette, Mr. Zhao got to the point. He asked if Lin Chi had seen the Archangel Michael. Why was the angel looking for him? What did he say? And what did the angel give Lin Chi? Before answering this series of questions, Lin Chi first confirmed whether there really were gods in this world. And of course, Mr. Zhao confirmed it. But not all gods exist. So the mysterious fog initially appeared in 1920, eventually turning Daxia into a desolate region. In 1922, the surviving humans made their first observation of a mythological creature. The figure referred to as the Dragon of Chaos was Leviathan, the Lord of the Seas, and from then on, humans also made observations of mythological deities, such as the angel Michael, code number 003. Because at one time, the figure used his sword to split a volcano. As it turned out, there was another angel shackled in chains with code number 004, namely Lucifer. And not only that, hundreds of years have passed, and they are still observing almost more than 100 gods from various mythologies. But there were only gods from Daxia or China that they could not find at all. Until now, observers still didn't know why that was. But there are some of them who believe that the disappearance of the gods from China still has something to do with the fog that engulfs almost the entire Earth. A few years ago, the Night Watcher also confirmed that the gods from Western mythology would begin to fight with the gods from China. Silent for a while, Lin Chi asked if Mr. Zhao was mentally ill. The scene returned to the previous area, and the driver, who was silenced by Lin Chi, finally regained consciousness, naked and bound. And in front of him was also the leader of the Night Watcher. From the driver's information, it was also found that the person who had slaughtered the entire area, which was now full of monster bodies, was a boy who looked like a student. And of course, who else would it be if not Lin Chi? And that's the ending of Donghua Slay the God episodes 1-2 this time, guys. What do you think is good, guys? If you like this series, like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you to those of you who have watched until the end. Bye.